So if you're here, you're probably looking at solar panels, and are they a con or are they any good? Well, the short answer is it's a little bit complicated. There are ways of doing it which make it effective, and there are other ways which are a big rip-off scam. Now, most of the things that I've seen, and I get them hell of a lot through Facebook on my phone, are all unachievable, unrealistic costs, which don't actually pay back anything. Now, to consider having a solar power system is one of those really odd things. Now, if we get some pen and paper and I'll write some things down, we can actually do the maths on this. Now, I worked out that if I wanted to run off-grid, I would never ever make any savings at all from running solar panels. And the mathematics to this are pretty simple and straightforward, and there are people on YouTube that do solar and wind power and hydropower, and all of those have made their calculations and what we call real world usage and real world power production. Now, for some of you, and this is just going to be for solar, I'm not going to go into hydro and wind power, but if we look at what's being sold on Facebook by startup fly-by-night companies, they're offering 16 panels, an 8 kilowatt system for £8,000. That you know, it seems fairly reasonable, but paying £8,000, is that really cost effective? Now, I've worked out that if you pay £1,000 a year in your energy bills, then you will never ever make any money back from using solar panels. Now, the reason for this is that to maximise the benefit from solar panels, you would need to have battery storage, and the cost of battery storage plus realistic cycle times and degradation from both the solar panels and the batteries is about 5% per year on average scientifically, so this can change anyway. So if you look at a solar panel, they're quite big, and we'll say we'll just have a square meter. This is a calculated means that they use on all solar panels anyway, and per meter they make about 250 watts. So what you then need to do is to take that wattage, which is at a low voltage, and invert it. Now, you'll get around about 90% of that anyway, so we can take off 20 watts straight away from a 200 watt panel, and that will give us 180 watts. So then you have your 180 watts, but as we know in our homes, we measure our usage in kilowatt hours. So what can we expect from that? Well, a kilowatt hour is a kilowatt hour. It doesn't matter about the voltage as long as the wattage is used. But we have to think that once we invert from DC solar panels to DC battery storage and voltage change, we then have to convert then up to AC and our voltage. So your higher voltage system is beneficial and more efficient to run a solar system at all. So if you had 12 volt batteries, you would have 10 batteries or 20 batteries running in series and parallel, so you didn't have to invert so much. So a 110 volt system containing 10 12 volt batteries would have a very good efficiency at inversion, although it's not that simple. I'm not going to go into energy losses, its inversions, or power and ampage conversions to get your real world usage and power losses and drains and everything else, but we'll just say it's about 25% in total, and that really just cuts out most of the issues that will arise. So if we had 10 batteries, how would that fare? Now we know that in the real world, and I'm just reaching out of frame to get some paper here, because to talk I need some paper to write on. So here is some paper. So a average cell, and I've looked at quite a lot, is about £352. That will give me 12 volts and probably around about 100 amp hours. Now 100 amp hours uses Ohm's law, so it's 12 times 100 gives you your watts, so that's 1200 watt hours. Now a battery will use around about 80% if you're using lipo batteries. If you're using lead acid, you're going to get about 50%. So what you need to do then is do the maths. So 1200 is easy on an AGM, which is lead acid, and the 1200 kilowatts we'll say is between 1 kilowatt hour and 600 watts. So 0.6 kilowatts. So what's the average use? Well, in our home we probably use around about 65 kilowatt hours a week. So if we had lipo batteries at £352 each at £3,520, so that's £3,520 will give me a 10 battery system. That's 1000 amp hours, or 100 amp hours at 120, 12 volts. So which is the better one? Because you have to think that I can either have 100 amps at 12 volts, or 100 amps at 120 volt, or 1000 amps hours at 12 volts. Well, they both actually equal the exact same amount of kilowatt hours. So that is pretty simple and straightforward. That's just Ohm's law. It doesn't matter about the voltage and the amps and storage. When they're conversed down, they all amount to wattage, which are going to be exactly the same. However, if I'm using the 120 volt system, I'm going to be slightly more efficient than inverting 12 volts to 240 volts or 230 volts, which is what we have here in the UK. So if we look at that £3,500 and gives us our kilowatts, let's just do the maths on that quickly. So we have 1000 times 12 is 1200 kilowatts, so 12 kilowatts minus 20%, that gives us 9.6 kilowatt hours. So we get 9.6 kilowatt hours of usable power, and that's not horrendously bad. So let's have a look at the power requirements. Now, to make 9.6 kilowatt hours, we need to look at 9.6, which is like kilowatt hours, divided by 4 is a 2.4, say 2.4 kilowatt. So you need about 2.4 kilowatts input. So that's, if we had 250 watt panels, then we would be good then for probably at least about 7 years. So that's 10 panels, and we're going to be paying about 100 to 200 pounds. So I'm going to call it 150 times 10, so that's 1,000, so 10 panels at 150, that's £1,500 plus our £3,520, that's £5,020 cost there for about 5 to 7 years. So what does that actually work out as? Well, let's have a look now at our energy prices. If I use 65 kilowatts a week and I times that by 52, that's 3,380 kilowatts off the grid, and that is, and then times 0.21 pence, that's £709.80 per year. Right, hang on a minute, then it starts to become a little bit odd. So if we put our 5020 divided by, let's say 7, is £717 and 14 pence. So we're paying more than what we're paying on the grid. So as you can see, even with this simple calculation and using some lower part systems, we're actually paying more for our electric that we can produce over that period of time. And these are standard use figures for the power. You have on top of that your inverters and controllers, which is probably, now it's not too bad. 10 years ago these were really expensive. Now they're between 500 and 750 pounds. So you've got that to add on top, obviously. But with the panel and power, sunlight hours and daylight hours are two different things. Now the national statistics and office and official figures is about 3.4 to 4.5 hours on your roof that your solar panels are going to get, because obviously with the sun angle, if this is the panel, as the sun comes into a more direct angle, it makes the efficiency on the panel, and then obviously when it's in alignment you get your high efficiency, and as it goes out you get a lower efficiency. So they say you get about 3.5 to 4.5 or 5 hours of sun, and there are charts made online that are available to see where your sun hours are. So you get probably about 5 hours, 3 hours peak, and then everything else on that's a lot less. Let's say 50% power for an extra hour or two on top of that. So we can see that we can produce a little bit more power, but the concern here is if you're using 65 kilowatts a week, then it works out, hang on, 65 divided by 7 is about 9.2 kilowatts a day. This system that I just scribbled down here will give you about 9.6 kilowatts a day, which is slightly above. But what you must remember is that for probably about 5% per year you're going to lose. So as your batteries degrade, you won't be able to store the power even if you can provide it from the panels, which degrade at a slower rate. So eventually, if you're looking at a 10-year plan, then not only do you have to consider the cost of it. Over 10 years I would expect to replace the batteries, so that's another £3,520 plus the 5020, that's £8,540. Then we'll add an extra £500 for the unit. That's £9,000. So that actually comes out quite more effective, because if we got £9,000 over a 10-year period, then it becomes less than £1,000. So let's divide this figure by 10, which is £904 per annum, which then it is more expensive because we looked at 717. Sorry, no, my mistake. It is actually even more expensive. So battery cell failure. Now most batteries are rated as their amp hours, but also the different technologies have charge cycles. Now the charge cycles are a full charge depletion of the battery, so whatever that actually is for the battery type. Now different types of batteries have different discharge. If you take 80% of your available charge, then your batteries will last a little bit longer, but they're on about now that battery technology has about 2000 charge cycles. So when we looked at this 9.6 and full charge days, if we took 2000 cycles and divided it by 365, that would last you about 5 years. So that's actually not too bad. But if you're looking at 7 to 10 years, then all of a sudden you have this battery charge there again. So you end up paying another £3,500 for batteries. So it doesn't really state, you know, the plain and obvious issues. Now, one guy who is selling solar at a misled sort of way, turned around and said, well, in December I only make 1.7 kilowatts in the day. So, and he has I think it was something like a 6 kilowatt system, or 6.5 kilowatts. So as you can see, in winter time you wouldn't make a 1.7 kilowatts. Hang on, let's just do this on my thing here so I don't make any mistakes. So if we said we had 9.6 kilowatts divided by 1.7, it would take just over 5.5 days to charge his batteries up. And that's actually what you would be using for your whole 1 day power. So that means 6 days you'd have no power. So you have to compensate for this, and this is the issue that you get with solar panels, is that off-grid or on-grid you're still paying a standard charge per day, which works out about £100 per year. So on top of that you're paying £100 per year on our figures that we just did. So that makes it even less effective. That makes it up to £1,000. So, you know, well, what are you going to do? You've got £100 per year, so over 7 years that's going to be £700 plus your £3,500 for batteries. It becomes really ineffective in the price, and because you're so low on your power, even though you can produce more power in the summer months when the sun is in the right place, in the winter months when it's not in the right place, you're going to need to make up 8 kilowatts or so of power, and that's not a huge amount of power and cost. So 8 kilowatts times 0.21 is about £1.68. So if you work out £1.68 times 365, that's £613.20 yearly. So if you can get £613 of power off the grid to power yourself, then the problem is though, why would you pay, was it 900 and something pounds or £700 for power, which are often advertised as power savings? It's not feasible whatsoever that you know, you're going to make any savings on solar. It is possible to do a break even, just about, maybe in magical circumstances. Now the only way you could probably sell is in the peak summer months is to have a payback system. I'm going to call it payback, but it's not payback, it's the energy company buy your energy and they pay 5p per kilowatt hour, and if you make you know, 100 kilowatts, you're going to get you know, £5. So you could make £5 on a day for probably, let's say we have a really good summer, and we'll say we get 65 times £5, that's £325, £325 per year. So you could make £325 per year to offset that cost, and we'll times that by 7, that's £2,275. Now if we take that from our totals, then it starts becoming slightly viable. So £5,000, what do we have? So we had, so that's £2,725 in buyback. So let's have a look. If we put, where are we? So 5020 minus 2275. That makes our cost there of £2,745 over 7 years. That's if we can produce that electric. But our grid power is £700. Our total cost and power is 717. So let's divide that. Divided by 717. So that makes it about 4 years. So effectively, if you produce enough excess energy, buy a tie-in system, which is other money as well, over 4 years you could offset your costs. So you're looking at a minimum investment term of 4 years, and you're going to save next to nothing. Yeah, so it really doesn't, unless you can power up the grid and buy power, and you're making a couple of kilowatts to sell them, then you're going to be using more power, plus you've got to take off your £613 off that as well. So it probably makes it about 7 years. So we've just turned round then, once we offset your winter buy power, the £700 in standing charges, you can see that it's not going to make any financial sense at all, even if you're producing electric. I mean, they're going to give you £325 a year. You're going to be buying £615 or whatever it was that we said, £613 a year, just to cover your losses of energy in about 40 to 50%, and then obviously the degrading, then having to replace the batteries. So your minimum break even would be 4 years. You know, in best case scenarios, in 7 years, you know, by the time everything starts breaking, you're starting to break even. So effectively, you know, how would you offset paying, you know, £700 a year, or £710? I'm going to call it 7. I'm going to go up to the bigger number, £710 a year, to pay out over £6,000 to have the same thing. It makes no financial sense. Now, the only way that I've actually managed to make it make financial sense is a small tie-in system. Solar panels are about 250 watts, a panel is 320. Now this panel here, this is a controller panel, sorry. Controller panel is about 320 watts, and then you can buy yourself 5 lead acid at £179 for 2, not each even, it was 150. So let's do the maths on this. This works well. 9911. So small scale works actually better. If I paid £179 per battery, I would need 6 batteries. That's £1,074. I would want to buy these panels, 250 watt panels, and they are £80. And that would give me, I'd buy 4, and that would give me 1 kilowatt. So let's do the 80 times 4, that's £320. £320. And the controller box is £320, about £320, give or take. And that has what's called a grid tie-in. So you're still paying your grid prices. However, this is how it works. You have your battery, and it produces your power you get from the solar. So that's stored here. When that power runs out, it switches over to grid. Simple, right? So what we do, well, we're looking at these amp hour batteries for 200 amp hours. So 12 times 200, they're that's 2.4 kilowatts, and that's times, what did we say, 4, wasn't it? Or was it 6? Let's do 4. So that's 96 kW divided by 2, 4.8 kilowatts. 4.8 kilowatts. So so there's our nominal system. It's 4.8 kilowatts. And what we're going to do is this. These 250 watt panels give us 1 kilowatt hour. So we should get a good 4 kilowatts in most months anyway. We're not considering, because obviously we've got 4.8 kilowatts here of usable power. We've paid £1,714. There is other charges on top of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to round this figure up to £2,000. How much you get for £2,000? So this £2,000 system is going to last about 5 years on the batteries. That we have no issue with. So £1,714 divided by 5 years is £342.80 per annum, and I'm hoping that's all coming up on now. I didn't actually check. So as you can see, if you're paying £342.80 a year for the offset cost of this, and you get 4.8 kilowatts. Now I said to you that I use on average 65 kilowatts per week. Let's go 4.8 times 7. That's 4.8 kilowatt power in your battery, and that's 33.6 kilowatts hour a week. So as you can see, I use 65 kilowatts. So I'm making almost half my power in the battery array, but I'm only spending £1,714, or what we're going to say is £2,000. So if I'm paying this amount, where am I saving any money? Well, as you can see, if I use 65 kilowatt hours, now most of the power usage are from the shower, cooker, kettle. So my shower, cooking, kettle are quite energy hogs, and the microwave. These are all power hogs. They don't use, obviously, you know, a mass amount of power. It's just for the time that they're on. So if you're using 7 kilowatts hours for 30 minutes, you're only using 3.5 kilowatt hours. That makes sense. Hopefully that makes sense to people. If you got, you know, if you're using 100 kilowatts an hour and use it for half an hour, you're only using 50 kilowatts of power. So obviously your kettle's on for 5 minutes or whatever it takes to boil. Your cooker's on, depending, you know, you might be doing a Sunday roast, so it's on for 2 hours. Your shower's on for 20 minutes. Your microwave's on for, you know, 5-10 minutes. Depending on what you're doing with it, obviously. But all of these things kind of add up. So these are my big power hogs here, and for most of the time I would rather just switch over to grid. But if I'm paying £342, now if I went downstairs right now and we looked at my power consumption, I'm probably using about 179 watt hours. And this is just during the day, and this will peak up to about 500 watts. And so if I do the simple maths of 500 times 24 hours in a day, let's go 16 hours, that's about 8 kilowatts, and that's most of the day. Now if I was out working 9 till 5, so 500 watts, which I probably wouldn't use anyway, 500 watts, and I come back in, I'm going to go 2 hours in the morning, let's say. Split this over. Let's do a little clock here. So this is our clock. This is our clock here. So I get up in the morning, I'm going to use power here, so we're going to go 2 hours here. I come back from work at say 5, and I go to bed about 11, so 6, 7, 8, so that's 10 hours. We're going to say 10 hours. So 10 hours is pretty good to be using that, times 10. Well, that's easy maths, and that's 5 kilowatts. So if we use 5 kilowatts but we make 4.8, that means I'm going to use 0.2 kilowatts of grid power to make up that deficit. And then during the next following day, the power will be restored during this. But this doesn't actually work out very well. Now, let's go back into this. If I make 4.8 kilowatt hours, then this is the issue I get. This is averaged out anyway, so we probably would make 6, 7 kilowatts or whatever. But what we want to be able to do is this. If this is a day, and this is day 2, so day 2 and day 1, we're going to say my solar panels are, my batteries are fully charged. So as I go down the day and use up all the power in my batteries, then the next following day my batteries have to charge. But if I make, we're going to call this 5 just for argument's sake. So as you can see here, we can go from 0, and there we go, charging up during that day, or my power loss and gain. It's going to take me, you know, some time to be able to pull the power up in the batteries and what I deplete. Now if I make extra, then I'm feeding my power supply. So we got battery, hang on, let's do this like this. So my power array has to charge the batteries up, otherwise I can't really use it, and as we probably all know, solar panel doesn't work in the dark. So what we can do is we can top up from the grid, but when that battery goes, then we use the power grid. So the next following day, our panel has to be able to produce what we use on average per day and what we need in our batteries. If we have a battery of 5 kilowatts and we use 5 kilowatts, then if we had an array of 5 kilowatts, that equals nothing. You can't put in what you can't get out. So what do you need to do? Well, the systems I looked at were a switched grid power system, so we can charge and we can get stuff off the grid. There's my little pylon drawing really badly there. So what we can do, or what we need to do, is have a tie-in system that when we use that power out of that, and don't forget that's averaged out anyway, and I've used 500 watts. We don't actually use 500 watts. We're probably around about 375. I've seen it as low as 94, but we're around about 168 on average, and we can be all the way up to 650, 675 depending on what I'm doing. So this wattage here, this means, well, do we take our peaks and our lows and mean them to make this number or whatever number we need here? Well, the answer to that is not really, because what we've done is with the solar cells charging, and we used a 4.5 hour rule, we make 4.8 kilowatts. So we're not really struggling here with power. We can probably make 5 kilowatts, and as long as these charts here make perfect sense as to what your power usage is, what your power draw is, then you're starting to get where the medium is, because here and here is an equal, so you're making none but you're losing none, and then obviously you want to gain more. So as you go through the morning, your charge is going to look like this. So here's the time during the day, and your charge rate will go, because this angle, this is a panel, this is the back of the panel here, you're going to get sort of like your peak charge rate here, and your photons are all going in like this, and this here, roughly there, is your peak power, which is what the rating is. So if that's rated for there, then when you're getting over here and over to here, the cellular angles will change anyway, so you're going to get less than peak. So you might get something like, let's say 50 watt and 50 watt, because we want to give it a really low specification to get there. So that's 100 watts anyway. It's not a great deal of power, it's 1/10 of a kilowatt obviously, and so what we want to do is, well, if that's 1/10, we did say there was a 2/10 kilowatt shortcoming here, well, that would probably make up for it anyway, but obviously we were using a 500 watt system calculation here. So as you can see, when we go to big power systems, it becomes completely unfeasible when trying to go off-grid with power generation from photovoltaic solar panel. It's just physically impossible. However, what we've just seen here is a tie-in system that works really well. It's affordable. We've just said we've rounded up to £2,000, and that's going to last us 3 years. So when we do the maths on that, it's going to last 5 years. So if we do £2,000 divided by the 5 years, it works out at £400 per year, which is considerably different to the £719 per annum of a larger system. This system I looked at because to me, I've gone through solar panels back 10 years plus ago, and I've always been fiddling with electronics. And there are other things that I've done as well, which we won't go into, but they are literally, the price of the inverters were quite expensive. Now they're cheaper. Battery prices, you have your lithium ion and your lead acids. If you've got 200 kilowatt hours either, you're looking at paying more than 3 times the price for a lithium ion battery, or you've got your lithium iron phosphates, LiFePO4. So you have to consider where your storage costs are, because that is where you're going to be losing all of your money, because that is the essential heart of the system which makes it work. I hope you found this video informative, and you can actually see on this I will be releasing another video on how to go and get that, and I will do a full parts list of the panels and inverters. These come recommended and tested by independent people. I've spoken to them about these systems, and hopefully this will be your way of saving yourself several £100s or thousands of pounds on your energy bill. If you like, subscribe, but don't subscribe to me. Pick the channel or playlist to subscribe to, because I do lots of different other things. Thank you for watching.